listening to Awake in Relationship, a podcast about intimacy, community, and culture in a time of great change, with Silas Rose.
Hey there, welcome to another episode of Awake in Relationship. My name is Silas Rose. And so I've been a meditator for about 20 years. And certainly my own practice has gone through different stages. When I first began to sit, it was really just about trying to calm the monkey mind. The endless torrent of thoughts and emotions that really weren't serving me. After about a year of practice, I was calmer. However, it wasn't really until I discovered the Buddhist teachings, particularly around self-compassion, that I started to discover kind of deeper layers. Maitri, or loving kindness towards self, really is the foundation of meditation practice. I might go so far as to say it's the secret sauce that turns mindfulness meditation into a path of confidence in our awakened nature. In this episode of Awakened Relationship, I'll be speaking with Susan Gillis Chapman, Buddhist teacher and author of the 5 Keys of Mindful Communication, about the practice of mindful self-compassion. As I mentioned, Susan's been on the show a couple times, and actually after our last interview, I believe it was in September 2020, she informed me of a recent cancer diagnosis, breast cancer. Thankfully it was caught early, and she's since gone through treatment and is doing well. I thought it would be really interesting to get Susan's perspective as someone who has practiced these teachings for over 40 years, how self-compassion has informed her approach to the cancer journey, including working with fear and physical discomfort. In my mind, this is really where the rubber hits the road. So if you've gone through a similar experience of total groundlessness, or maybe you know someone that's going through that right now, I think you'll find this conversation very insightful. So please, stay tuned. So Susan, welcome back to Awaken Relationship.
Thanks, Silas. It's wonderful to be able to do this again with you.
Last time we talked, actually, at the end of our interview, you let me know of some shocking news. You've kind of gone through a big journey since last time, and you were diagnosed with early stage breast cancer. How are you doing right now? We'll get into the details later, but how are you feeling right now?
I'm at the other side of that journey. I've been 2 months out of chemotherapy, 1 month out of radiation, and I'm actually feeling really good.
Yeah, well, you look great. For the listening audience, Susan's wearing this wonderful burgundy jumper, and she's got hairs coming back, so she looks like a classic Buddhist nun.
Yep, been there, done that, got the T-shirt, and now I've got the haircut again.
Nice. So that's probably a good place to begin, actually. For those that haven't listened to previous episodes with Susan, let's talk about your introduction to the path. You've been a Buddhist practitioner for over 40 years. Part of that was actually in deep retreat, but how did you first connect to the practice of meditation?
Yeah, this was 1974, which kind of gives you an idea of my age. And I had just come out of a very lengthy period of depression and using a lot of psychedelic drugs and being sort of floundering. And then my brother was killed in a car accident. And my brother actually had been studying Tibetan Buddhism at the time. And meanwhile, I had previously had what I call a mystical experience. I'd had sort of an insight that was unshakable about the nature of reality, the nature of my mind, but it was fleeting and I couldn't stabilize it. But my brother kept saying, you should come to meet this Tibetan Lama. And I would say, no, anything institutionalized is corrupt by definition. So I had no interest in an institutionalized tradition. But later, after he died, I was really actively seeking a teacher in a more desperate way, you could say. And I came across an article written by somebody I didn't even know if he was a Buddhist, but it was a person who described how to work with your mind in a way that I knew this person understood what I wanted to learn. And so it turned out it was Trungpa Rinpoche, a Tibetan Buddhist teacher. And so I went down to study with him in Boulder, Colorado.
And what was it like meeting him for the first time?
It was very interesting because, I gathered with thousands of other people for this first summer event at Naropa, what is now Naropa University, Naropa Institute. A lot of people were there like me also to study with Allen Ginsberg and Ram Dass. And I was in this crowd the day before when everything was being set up, and in comes the person who's, partially paralyzed and can barely, is sort of leaning on somebody as he comes into the room wearing jeans and suspenders and a flannel shirt, smoking a cigarette. And instantly I knew that was him, but he didn't match at all, what you would think a Tibetan Lama should look like. At that point, actually, it really confirmed my trust in him. He was very authentic. But when he sat down to teach, it was absolutely a stunning experience of presence, really authentic presence. Every gesture with his hand, it was an unself-conscious but completely synchronized with the audience transmission of teachings. And especially in the question and answer for which he was famous, that someone would ask a question and he would go behind the question and just penetrate. So it was a very, very powerful experience.
Yeah, I've heard that from a number of his original students, that there was an atmosphere that he created.
Yeah, very much.
You eventually went on to, you sort of jumped in the deep end, really. You went on to do a 3-year retreat. What did that time in seclusion really teach you about the human condition, and particularly about today's topic, which we're talking about, is self-compassion?
Yeah, well, first of all, I went with my husband. So even though when we were in retreat, we were both taking monastic vows and we were separated, but for the subsequent 6 years, we were living together in a cabin on the land. I think the very first thing, and we actually laugh a lot about it, we did just yesterday, thinking about our arrival in 3-year retreat and what the expectation was and how completely opposite the reality was. And what that points to is it was about community. You think of seclusion, you think of monasticism, you think of deep retreat as being this completely solitary journey, but the reality is it's intensely communal, but combining that with deep personal practice. So we practiced 12 hours a day in our rooms, but meanwhile, we mixed with each other. The irritation factor is something everyone talks about, it's like being married to strangers, you're just so intimate with another group of people, and it's not at all idyllic, but you get the tools to work with the diversity and the disappointment and all of the things that come up in community. So I could say the human condition follows you wherever you go. And even if you were to go into a cave and be isolated, it'll be there when you come out, and it won't be processed. So the one thing about being in a group retreat is you get a chance to process it. But if you're by yourself, you're the only companion, and you don't get a chance to have that mirror effect that relationship gives you.
What was reintegration like? I remember I did a 1-month retreat about 10 years ago, and I made the mistake of right after the retreat heading to a mall.
Right.
Which is a really bad idea for anyone listening.
Oh, I remember after the first year of retreat, because we did them 1 year at a time. We were on a bus heading back to Halifax, which is about a 6-hour journey. And the bus stopped in a little gas station that has like a food thing, a little grocery store. And I saw this mother with her little child about 4 years old, and I was just like, a child. Look at that beautiful child. And I think I said that to her. Oh, your child is so beautiful. I think she looked at me like, what is wrong with this woman? But yeah, I mean, there was actually a positive sense of glow if we were in a mall or wherever. It was, you know, just appreciating the colors and smells and movement rather than any kind of, I like this, I don't like that.
How long did that last?
I don't remember, but probably not very long. And we settled in, in between each year of retreat, we settled into our life. We were living in Alaska, got back to work, got back to our. But I remember there was a lingering capacity to pay attention based, from that year of practice that I was like, my mind was actually staying where I wanted it to be, which was kind of shocking, actually.
Yeah, for me, it was more like I just wanted to kind of eliminate the contrast. So I would, go eat 3 chocolate bars.
Right. Yeah, eliminate the contrast. Although, right, the 3, go for whatever you couldn't have or that you thought about, and then discover disappointment. Like the first taste is good, but then by the 3rd or 4th bite, you're not even tasting it, right?
Many people listening are probably aware of the benefits of meditation, particularly mindfulness. What's talked about less so is really self-compassion or compassion practice. How does compassion fit into the path?
Well, the word path, certainly when you've taken it upon yourself to bring spirituality into your life, then the path is your life, right? And compassion is described as, the human response to suffering when you're open-hearted, right? Because the other possibility is to respond to suffering by shutting down or by trying to negotiate. And mindfulness, is training and paying attention. So if you pay attention to the present moment will manifest in your life as a variety of experiences. And when those experiences are uncomfortable, you get a chance to see how you shut down, or you get a chance to expand your capacity to be curious about discomfort. And that's really the journey of the Buddha. The Buddha famously was curious about the experience of human suffering. And, we don't think of that as a huge, change in the human condition, but actually that simple act of turning toward the experience of suffering with love rather than trying to get lost in all of the different habits of getting rid of it. So the mindfulness, when we're practicing, and of course, at least in Buddhism, it's really important to be to have a map. The word path indicates that the human journey of our life can actually be guided by teachings or guidance from people who have actually successfully used these practices of meditation to become more compassionate, to discover what human beings are capable of. And so when you meet a great teacher or a person who's accomplished of any tradition, they are generally highly compassionate people, and they're generally non-reactive people. So you think, well, that's what the Buddha looks like to me. That's what a human being is capable of when we do this practice.
And that's, it's something I feel that's often missing from the discourse around mindfulness right now. It's seen as more of a technique and, for achieving relaxation or more focus. Biohackers are really into meditation. Even the military is really into meditation right now to become more efficient killers.
Yeah, I mean, not to promote efficient killing, but I think it's a really good thing that people are, when you look at what is meditation, it's sitting down and doing nothing. And that's the antidote to the kind of speed that keeps a lot of our avoidance of suffering going, So yes, you always are going to align with your intention. Once, and that's again, it's your path. If your path is to become a better killer, then you'll use the techniques to do that. But in the process, if you encounter your heart, if you encounter your own suffering, and if you're really practicing, you'll notice that there's a whole habitual reaction of shutting down. And, you can choose. I mean, the beauty of training in mindfulness is it gives you a choice. Either I stay present with this discomfort or I go with the shutting down. And that's where it's really important to have teacher, teaching, and community. Those are the three qualities of Buddhism, the taking refuge in Buddha, Dharma, Sangha. Because without that social support, if you're being trained to kill, then you'll miss out on what that heart feels like.
So we wake each other up.
We wake each other up, awaken relationship.
So is there a technique for self-compassion, or do you see it mostly as a view?
That's really interesting. Yes, there's, compassion is natural. It's the natural response to suffering. And so the technique is always basically identifying what's blocking that. If you see a very young child, they'll respond compassionately when they witness suffering. And the parent-child or the caregiver-child relationship is how that first stage of self-compassion is nurtured. So if you go to a parent with you've skinned your knee roller skating or something like that, and the parent responds with love, then you're bringing compassion to the injury. And then that trains you to bring your own, bring compassion to your own suffering. So that's, I think, one of the first trainings is, as you said, it's the mirror effect of relationship. When I turn to you, my friend, and I express that I'm suffering and you respond with compassion, then, that encourages and strengthens my own ability to cut through whatever obstacle I have. I mean, this happened to me yesterday. I took my mother to the eye doctor. The eye doctor noticed that I had, no hair. And he asked about that. And I said, I've just completed cancer treatment. And he had such a response of compassion. And he was curious, what kind of cancer did you have? What kind of treatment did you have? This kind of inquiry. And I felt really held and nurtured by that short encounter.
Yeah, well, in terms of your journey through the health system, you've had many similar experiences.
Yes, it has been really a positive experience of, it's like there's these hidden worlds. And the kind of breast cancer I have is called triple negative. It's quite rare, and it's very aggressive. And it's generally, I believe, only women get it. It's not the kind of breast cancer that men can get too. And so what I found was when I entered into the health system, every health provider I had was a woman. I had a woman surgeon. I had women radiology oncologists. I had a woman oncologist. I had, it was like entering into this world of all of these women who are responding to me, I felt, with not only compassion, but skillfulness, which helps a lot. Because there is a relationship between compassion and the development of skills or powers to help others.
You spent a bunch of time in I think a Facebook group or people at different stages of their cancer journey where there was a lot of fear. I'm curious how you feel that your practice, particularly the practice of self-compassion, has helped you through this journey.
Yeah, thank you for reminding me of the Facebook group, because that was really important. There was actually 4 or 5 groups for women with this particular kind of cancer. And it did remind me, because in the time of COVID, this pandemic, there's no way of being part of a support group. So it was really important to me to hear other women's voices and other women's experiences. And sometimes that helped validate a part of myself that I wasn't listening to. So I think that, the first thing I could say is that what I learned was how I was not being compassionate to myself. It wasn't like I suddenly, had this flare up of self compassion that matched the experience. It was really, there's discovering your own unique form of denial, discovering your own unique form of self deception, discovering your own unique ways of avoiding. And so I learned a lot about how, for instance, I just dove right into the medical journals and learned everything I could about triple negative cancer, about all of the different treatments. I learned, and then I realized that's my style. Is I just want to learn and understand. And it's not a bad thing to do, but meanwhile, there is like this part of me that was more like a child, not needing or wanting that information, just wanting to be comforted. The interesting thing about cancer, and I realize it's not true maybe for everyone, but for me, it's not the cancer you suffer from, it's the treatment. And with my particular cancer, it's like you get the most intense chemotherapy that they have. And so it's like from the very first infusion, you have, not everyone, but I had extremely intense and confusing side effects. Like your body is speaking a foreign language, or at least 20 different foreign languages, because your body is being assaulted by a poisonous chemicals. And it's probably similar to an ecosystem in distress, and normally we can listen to our body and it's communicating in a language we understand. But when your body is being poisoned and you're telling yourself, this is good for you, I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, there's a cognitive dissonance.
Exactly. So, it really brought back, yes, my mind could understand it, but it brought me back to this little kind of the part of me that was like the child, just, saying this hurts. I can't sleep. I can't eat. It was very, and I think that's the dawning of self-compassion. Again, it's recognizing the ways you avoid it. And then my husband was incredibly, amazingly capable of absorbing my complaints. And so he really became kind of that mirror of loving kindness that helped me gradually increase my self-compassion.
I'm thinking back to when my mom actually got cancer. She eventually succumbed to it. And, she's very much a warrior type, fearless. And her approach was very much kind of, head down, go through it. And I respect that. And she never complained. And but I kind of wanted her to kind of hear what she was feeling.
Yeah, somebody, I was doing a Caring Bridge blog, which is, a way of sharing your experience a little bit. And one woman wrote to me and said, I'm so grateful that you're describing your experience because my dad died of cancer and I never knew what he went through. And I thought, oh gosh, that helped me because, I wanted to be able to make my experience useful to others.
So how can people begin to kind of cultivate that sort of fearlessness or openness towards these kind of big life transitions that we all go through where we can expect?
Well, I think you already said, I think the first word is about expectation. And here again, it's very much influenced by our community and our social, you could say, platforms. I mean, how are we thinking about this journey of our life? And are we thinking that episodes of suffering are some kind of punishment? Or are we thinking that episodes of suffering are something that shouldn't be there because we deserve to have a privileged life? Or, all of these expectations that when you say them out loud, it sounds, obvious. But when you see how they're permeating the background of how we think as a collective, that will trigger fear, or that will trigger self-hatred or self-aggression, right? So then you get into this, why me? What's, what did I do to deserve this? Or and granted, I mean, especially looking at my Facebook friends and seeing how often this cancer hits young women with little kids. I mean, I feel the same. I think, like, why you? I wish I could take your cancer away so you could have this life with your child, because I've already had that. So I understand that kind of grief and fear. But I think, again, the value of having a map for the journey of life is that we build in the realistic expectation that death could occur at any time. I mean, I saw that at the beginning of my path with my brother dying at age 19 in a car accident, that it's really important to contemplate life is not a guarantee. Health is not a guarantee. You could feel really healthy and then discover that you've got a deadly disease that you weren't even aware of. So I think that's the beginning of working with fearlessness, is just having a realistic expectation of what life is, what life means.
Yeah, and a willingness to kind of lean into that with a bit of curiosity.
Yeah, I think that would be like the second step is, first you adjust your expectations, and then when the actual discomfort or grief or shock or pain arises, that's where it does take training and support from other people to lean into it instead of pushing it away.
We're kind of, as a culture, going through some pretty big shocks and changes, with COVID. And then, of course, the elephant in the room, the climate crisis. How can mindful self-compassion, if we can call it that, help us to make better choices?
Well, I think for myself, again, mindful self-compassion is all about beginning with your body, because, yes, we suffer from mental and emotional conditions, but it's always, coming back to your body and embodiment. And our bodies are the ecosystem. Our bodies are our connection to the planet. We're made of the elements. And so I think changing our relationship to our bodies and realizing that our bodies don't belong to me. They belong to the earth. They belong to the air. They belong to society. That's just a very personal starting point, that the mindful self-compassion we take to our own experience of joy and suffering, and that ought not automatically, but we can expand that to, when I'm walking in the forest and I notice that the red cedars are starting to die, instead of blocking that, or instead of running off in my familiar patterns of self-righteous indignation or whatever it is, to just feel the pain of that in the same way that I felt, with breast cancer surgery or side effects or something, like, because that tree is not separate. That tree is your body. So I think there's something very profound about relating to your embodied experience and connecting that to our whole planet.
Absolutely. And particularly in this time when there's so much misinformation and, conspiracy theories, and it's a very confusing time. I think that the only antidote to that is to develop some sense of embodied truth, personal truth.
Yeah, you could say the body's always telling you the truth. It's just whether or not you can hear it, and to hear it from your heart rather than hear it from an opinion. I mean, conspiracy theories are anybody who meditates. If you've been trained in meditation, you have learned a technique where you're able to notice the thought patterns and you interrupt them and come back to the breath or to the space. And what you discover is how afraid we are of that space. And that's why we lock on to any thought pattern at all. A conspiracy theory is like getting engaged in a really interesting movie that starts explaining things in really simplistic terms that give you a temporary feeling of control. And the point is, you don't interrupt it. You don't come back to the space that your body is always calling you back to. So it's a really terrible form of suffering to be trapped in those ideologies. My teacher, Trungpa Rinpoche, said there's 3 forms of social disease. The first one is materialism in general, which is this whole idea that we should be feeling comfortable all the time, and when we're uncomfortable, there's something wrong. But the second one is ideologies, like framing our experience in such a simplistic manner that we're seeking comfort by sharing these ideologies and joining a tribe. And that frames how we communicate with each other and, sense of belonging and all of that. And then the third one is the most serious, and that is using your meditation practice or your spirituality as a way of actually building up barriers instead of dissolving them. And that's really very subtle. And I think that is what you can notice again in this journey of self-compassion is, as I said earlier, what I noticed is more the ways that I was tricking myself out of just being present, and often using my spiritual practice to do that. Nowadays they call it spiritual bypassing, but it's like, again, the body is always speaking the truth. It's the truth about the sound of the bird, even before you name what that bird is. It's just that sound, or the stubbing your toe, or the, nausea that you're feeling. And you either respond to that compassionately, or you come up with some alternative path.
Thank you, Susan, so much for this conversation. And I should mention to the audience that Susan's written a wonderful book about dissolving barriers called The 5 Keys of Mindful Communication. And Susan, how can people get that book and learn more about what you do?
It's available on Amazon. I guess I should be promoting local booksellers. You could certainly, order it through your local bookseller. Chapters did carry it, but it doesn't, as far as I know, not all locations have it. But anyway, yes, you can get it, or get it directly from Shambhala Publications.
Thank you again to my dear friend, Susan, for this insightful and honest conversation about something so personal. If you want to find out more about her work, you can head over to susangillischapman.com. I'll be sure to post some links and resources in the show notes at awakenedrelationship.com. While you're there, please sign up for the newsletter. If you've found value in this episode or any previous episodes of Awakened Relationship, I would super appreciate you leaving a review either on Apple or Spotify, really wherever you listen to podcasts. It really helps me to grow the show. So thank you again for tuning in. Till next time, stay connected.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Awake in Relationship. If you liked what you heard, please click subscribe to get the latest show delivered fresh to your device, or sign up for our newsletter at awakeinrelationship.com. Sharing is caring.